Hello and welcome to episode 230 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leaks. Damien, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm progressing with my fraud case, so I know I keep promising I'm going to talk about this on the podcast, but we slowly, let's just say the money's come back. So we made progress in that regard, but in terms of actually finding out what's gone on and a complaint I'm making, we're still slowly progressing on that front, and it's painful. But I will, once I get the full lowdown on what occurred, then I'm going to share it with everybody on the podcast. But apart from that, all good. I went football with my daughter at the weekend up to St George's Park. We did it last year, so the home of English football, which was brilliant because we watched the Lionesses play. There's a nice circular, almost picture really, because there was my daughter watching the Lionesses on the big screen at the home of English football, which has got some sort of quite nice circular inspirational story there. But yeah, that was good. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really to update. It's funny, actually. I'm sort of grinning to myself because I've been working with you all week, so you know what I've been up to. I've basically been nothing.
It was probably a slightly pointless question, but that's just made me think of me and you chatting to each other, because we've come up with this idea that we're going to do something new in the future, in the coming podcast, or after the podcast. We're going to start on a Monday. Andy and I are going to go online and start a thread on Facebook and basically chat to you guys. So you could talk about what's been on the podcast, about what's been on previous podcasts, what you'd like to see, talk about the weather, whatever you want to do. We're going to be on there for about an hour. We're going to pin it down in the next week how it might work. And also I want you guys to message in, tweet me at the usual Twitter, Money to the Masses with a number 2, or email me, Damien at moneytothemasses.com. So let me know if it's a good idea, if you fancy that, if you want to do it, because I know a lot of you do write in after each show, and I think it'd be quite good fun to have a bit more interaction.
Good, and we're going to try and time that for sort of lunchtime-ish, aren't we, to make it a bit more social so that people can log on maybe while they're grabbing a sandwich.
Yeah, and they can, we're grabbing our sandwiches as well. So yeah, we're going to listen out for that. We're going to talk about it probably next week, and then we'll try and do it the following Monday.
Perfect. So what have we got coming up on this week's pod?
Right. 3 pieces as ever. The first piece I'm going to do is about teaching kids about money. So your children probably don't get a lot of personal finance stuff at school. They might get a bit. And there are some amazing teachers out there that do teach children about money, and they've been rewarded with a national awards ceremony that happened not long ago. And the Telegraph did a really interesting piece where they talked to some of those teachers and asked them what were their tips for the best ways of teaching children about money. So we're inspired by that piece, and we're going to add in some of our own. We're going to also do an investment piece that's based around how to sleep easier, because we all get worked up and it's a danger that we can get too overly obsessed about our investments. I'm just trying to make it so people can sleep a bit easier, because investing is not meant to be all consuming. And the final piece, I'm letting Andy go rogue again.
There's always a slight trepidation in your voice when you say it.
No, there's not. There's really not. I've seen the article that Andy wrote this week was brilliant. But anyway, what's the piece?
The piece is on auto switching your utility bills. So the difference between different types of sites that will be able to do it for you, and just a bit of advice.
So we'll kick off with the teaching kids about money. Now, teaching children about money is a real hot topic. There's some elements of personal finance that happens in school, but what we're talking about is particularly small children. So we're talking kids at primary school, and particularly the younger years. But it just shows, I think, how far backwards we've gone in actually educating kids about money, because partly that's down to the fact that money has changed. The way we use money has changed with the age of the internet. So everything's very different from even when we were kids.
Cash in my household has pretty much disappeared. My children got given some money by some grandparents the other day, and they literally looked at it like it was a note. I don't mind, we're doing well, our family, but they looked at this sort of piece of paper and they didn't know what it was.
Yeah, and so that doesn't surprise me.
It's not good, is it?
It's not. And a tip from me, and this is one that I've actually heard personally from teachers I've spoken to myself about how to help children understand money, is for them to see you using it. So when we were all growing up, we used to see our parents using money at the shop and handing over cash and getting change back. Now they don't see that as often, because we go up to the cash point or we go to the cashless till and we just tap our card and just it goes beep. And a lot of the teachers actually said, teachers that I've spoken to, but teachers who accepted these awards, they said that there are a lot of kids who think that's how money works. So you pay for things with a card that is basically just taps. It's almost magic. You tap that so you can get whatever you want. So you go up to something, as long as you've got this card, it's a bit like a pass card. Yep, I'll have that, thanks, tap it, beep. Well, money doesn't work like that. They have no concept of what's behind that there's actually money in a bank. So the first thing is try and use money so kids can see you handing over cash and then receiving change in return, and encourage them to do it. So when you go up the shop, let them pay and see if they get the right change and see if they can work out how much things cost and how much change they should have. Because I look at my daughter, who is 9, I look at her schoolwork that she brings home, and there's been stuff that she's done about change, and I've seen it. They have to work out sums of money. But of course, she's never really used money. And I mean, that's just the way society works. So try and get kids to use money. And I mentioned there about banks. And one of the things that kids don't understand is how banks work. So there was a funny quote where one child thought that's where all our money was stored, was in the bank. So for everybody, they thought everybody's money was just in this bank held safe. And another kid thought that's where the clothes were and food. Because obviously they hear the word food bank and then they hear the words bank, and they kind of, and if you're a child, you're not going to really know the difference. The fact they're using the term bank as a sort of a play on the actual what a bank is. So
I'm embarrassed to say that the only bank my eldest child has ever been in is Gringotts Bank in Harry Potter world. And so she, in her mind, it's this make-believe thing that's in the movies. Yeah. Because I've never taken my child to the bank.
Yeah, well, we don't have to go to banks.
She calls them the machine in the world, the magic machine. She just assumes it just, the money just comes out, and she doesn't. I need to do better in terms of educating the process of how the money gets there.
Yeah, and there was a really good tip on this, and it was trying to teach your children. We talked about before about the value of money, but you need to teach children how the money gets there and how it's earned. So children don't have a concept necessarily of earning money, how long it will take you to earn a particular item. So let's say they want a Nintendo Switch or some games console that's going to cost a few £100s. It's a good idea to try and teach your children to work out how many hours it takes to earn that item. Then they start to understand what money is and the value of it. So yeah, just give them a general steer. I'm going to throw some numbers out there. I mean, you might not know what the minimum wage is in the UK, but for an under 18, it's £4.35. And there's different bands. From 18 to 20, it's £6.15. For 21 to 24-year-olds, it's £7.70. And so for 25 plus, it's £8.21. So for a child, use the £4.35 figure, and then they can work out that their Nintendo Switch or whatever it is probably going to be about 70 to 100 hours worth of work for them to have earned that if they were earning a job. And so then they can start to realise how expensive things are and why we all, when they drop the iPad on the floor and they think we're just, well, you can get another one, can't you? So try and educate them on that in terms of value of money. There was another thing actually the teachers said, which if as an adult you don't always appreciate the things that children do and don't know because you just assume it's a given. One of the things they said that they wish they'd known when they were younger is that you have to pay for utilities. So when you turn on the tap or a light, the reason that is working is because you're paying your bills. And if you don't, then ultimately your electricity wouldn't work. And that all costs money. And the fact that children don't get the fact that that stuff is money. So if you leave the light on, that's costing us money. I know it's not good for the planet either, but it is also costing us. And so to understand that all the things that we buy, everything has a price. And I was talking to my daughter the other day, and we had a bizarre conversation about tax. I can't remember how it came up, but I started to explain to her about the idea of tax. She was asking me, well, what do you mean, what's tax? And so I started to break down that how much do you think if I was to earn £100, I would get of that in my pocket? And so she thought that, well, you get £100. When I started to break down to her that, yeah, you won't get that. Even somebody who's earning basic rate tax, you've got to look at about 30 quid of that's gone straight away. For some people, it's even more. Then when every time we buy things, there'll be maybe VAT. So she was mortified to think that if for an average person, perhaps, for every £100 they earn, they probably only get about 70 of it. Well, where's the rest of it go? And I said, well, the road we're driving on, who paid for that? Who's paid for all these lights? Who pays for the dustman to come round? And she was marvelling at that. Like, what, they've got all that money, so where is that money? And so she's sitting there thinking...
That's the question that us adults are still asking now.
But the whole idea that all these things are paid for by us. And so children don't get that fact. So this then went into a politics conversation with her. I said, this is why it's important when people get upset about things that happen when you see these politicians on telly and they want to vote for people. That all comes into that to do with politics, it can be quite a nice link to some of the other stuff that they will see in the rest of their lives anyway. So yeah, you can end up having a tax conversation like I did. Now, the other thing they recommend you talk about is budgets. So children don't know how to budget or what a budget is because they won't see you do it. And the teachers were suggesting that you should try and engage children with budgeting, even your own budgets, or explain if you don't want to open your finances to your child and therefore the playground and therefore half of their parents, is to talk about something you bought in the past. So good example is a wedding. How did you afford to get married? How much did it cost? And then try and break down how you managed to save for that and budget for it. And that gives them a good example of, yeah, do you know what? You can't just have what you want in life. Another tip is you should try and teach them about the difference between wants and needs. So what you would like and what you actually need. Yeah. So they're not obsessed with the frivolous things in life and consumerism, which is hard. I know that's just children. They don't really understand needs. They just know wants. But trying to get them to understand that, they'll then start to understand what money is and how it works.
Interestingly, you make that point, Damien, because I think this is possibly more of a problem for the sort of the middle and the upper classes if you want to put people into the social spectrum. Because I bet there are people that have less money, families growing up in more deprived areas, that money is probably more often talked about in their homes because we can't afford this or we need this. So I suppose it's...
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's true. And the other thing I think is and we don't want to be making sweeping generalisations, but people who tend to have less money actually tend to be better with it than those who are affluent. In my experience, I've met some really rich people when I was working in the city. They don't need to be good with money because they've got lots of it. And whereas people who are unfortunately haven't got a lot of money at any given moment, they have to be very good and make it go further. So, I mean, I think it's a fair point. Some people will be much better at the wants and needs part of things. I think one universal point nearly all of the teachers said, and I think the people I've spoken to have said about teaching children, is the importance of saving. So they need to learn or try and teach your children basically the art of saving, how to do it and why you need to do it. And so encourage them. There was one suggestion is when they give their children money, pocket money, or they get gifted money from people, they encourage them to put it in one of 3 envelopes. Now, one envelope will be for treating themselves, so be able to go out and spend money. One of them might be for something that may be slightly more middle term in terms of time frame, so saving to go on holiday or maybe saving some money so they can go out with their friends. And then there'll be another envelope which is about the long-term stuff. So you're trying to get children to think about putting money in separate pots to be able to plan for something in the future, but also be able to go and spend money as well. And then the last one I mentioned on that is one way it can be to encourage them is that if they save money and put it in a piggy bank or wherever they want to put it, then you could actually technically top that up if they get to a certain target. So you could give them, doesn't be crazy, but that gives them an incentive to try and save. And that fundamentally is what a bank works like. Yeah. You put money in a bank.
Pensions and things like that.
Yeah, you get money topped up and with interest. So that can encourage that saving incentive. And my funny thing with my daughter, I have the opposite scenario. She's become really shrewd in thinking, right, do you know what, Dad, I'm going to save my money. She saves her money, squirrels it away. Yeah. She's always been like that.
I've got the same. Yeah.
But what my daughter does though, she'll go, right, we're going to go to the shop and she wants to buy something. I said, bring your money. Okay, we'll do that. And then she'll end up spending money she hasn't got enough with her. And so I end up saying, okay, I'll pay for the other £10 on top of that, but you've got to give me your money when I get in. And she banks on the fact, I know she does, that I forget. And then she gets home and suddenly her money's not going down. She hates spending her own money, which I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. It's good that she saves, but I do think we need to teach kids to spend a bit of money. So that's a roundup of the best ways to teach young children about money from the great minds of the people who actually do it for a living.
Okay, so we're moving on to investing, and you mentioned earlier something to do with sleeping. What have we got?
This piece is around trying to help people to stop stressing so much about investing, because if you invest, you shouldn't be obsessing about it. And if you are, and you can't sleep at night, then something's wrong. So these are just a few quick tips to help people enjoy investing a little bit more, but not spend their whole night up worrying about it. Now, first of all, if you are fretting about your investments, if you find yourself checking the market all the time, or you're checking your investment pot all the time, then you've got to think whether it's for you, if it's really for you, this DIY investing malarkey. If it's not, then you should get somebody else to do it. And I know that means you're going to have to pay them, but if the responsibility lies with somebody else, and ultimately you can therefore hold them to account, then that might make you sleep a bit easier. Because some of the reason that people end up having sleepless nights is about they worry they've made the wrong choice. And so they see markets move in one direction or another, and then they start to panic. So that's the first thing. But if you are going to do your own investments, or perhaps even if you have an advisor, don't check your investments too often. It's a problem with the modern world of online apps and being able to see things more regularly. So you don't need statements now for investing. You could log on at the touch of a button and you can see the value of your pension. And Andy's laughing here because we've had this conversation in the office.
I've come in one morning while the markets were going a bit crazy, and I said to Damien, I can't believe it. I've moved all my money into a pension consolidation thing, and I've lost £300-400. And Damien's like, yeah, but the markets are going crazy. Just chill out. Don't look at it every day. It will be fine, kind of thing, And I stress too much, and now I keep looking every day, but I don't stress them up.
Yeah, but I was right because it came back. It was the point when I think it was during May when markets dipped. And the problem is you don't have that context of what the rest of the market is doing. And I did some research for 80/20 investor members looking at the impact of checking your portfolio too often. And what I did is I looked at the odds of your portfolio being higher than the previous time you checked and did different time frames. Now, the more regularly you check, the chances of your portfolio being up or down is just pure chance. It is just random, pretty much. It's almost 50-50. But as your time frame between the time you check extends, once you get to about 3 months, then the chances of your portfolio being higher are about sort of 75%. So there's about a 3 in 4 chance that your portfolio will be higher. And that is partly because investment markets over time do tend to go up. But the point is that if you check too often, you're more likely to fall foul of your own behavioural biases in investing, which is anchoring, where you obsess about a number or a value, and then loss aversion, where you start to lose money, you then panic and you do something. So if you keep checking, it's basically chance whether your portfolio will be higher or lower, and therefore you're going to probably make an panicked investment decision based on pure chance. Whereas if you check less regularly, your portfolio will be doing what it's meant to be doing, like Andy had there. Actually now it's higher than it was before, and it'll make a more considered decision. So check less often. The other one is automate as much as you can, I think. So if you're going to invest, drip in. So put in a certain amount a month over a period of time, because then if the market falls, then you're going to be buying more at a lower value, and therefore when the market comes back eventually, you're going to be better off than if you lumped all the money up front. Of course, if markets rallied, then you would have lost out by dripping in if you put all the money up front. But by actually following a process, then you take the worry out, because it's actually, you're just following a methodology. So it's all about process. You'll see that this is about process mostly. If you review your portfolio, you shouldn't do it too often either. I'm not talking about checking, I'm talking about changing. So I did some other research recently about how often you should check your portfolio and the impact for 80/20 investor members. And again, there was a point that if you do it more regularly, so if you keep changing things every month, it has no more real impact than if you've done it less frequently. And I'm not going to give away the exact number at which point it does make a difference. So there is a point where if you start not changing your portfolio and just leave it, then it does become detrimental. I'm not going to give you that, but let's just say by the time you get to 6 months, then it starts to have a detrimental impact by not looking at your portfolio regularly. But initially, 1 month, 2 months, etc., it doesn't have a big impact. So don't keep obsessing and keep trying to tweak things too much. The biggest one is risk. If you are lying awake at night and you are worried about your portfolio, the chances are it's a good sign you're taking too much investment risk. So if you, conversely, it can actually be you're not taking enough. So let's say you're hoping the market's going to fall and you've got that fear of missing out, then you might be thinking, oh, I hope the market crashes so I can get back in at a cheaper rate. What you need to do is actually moderate the amount of risk you're taking in your portfolio to a level that you're comfortable with. And once you're comfortable with it, you won't even look at the market because you're not really going to be that bothered, because you're going to be riding it in the appropriate way that you are comfortable with. So that's a big one. If you're waking up at night or you're worrying about investing, you certainly aren't taking the right amount of risk. If you're really worried, then you could just buy and hold something. So go for a passive solution, something like maybe Vanguard, or you could use a robo-advice proposition out there that uses passives. then you really won't be worried about what's going on in the market because it's kind of been taken care of. The next major one I would say is stop reading the financial press. Now you have to remember the financial press works by having sensationalist clickbait headlines. So they are going to be talking about the next big crash or the next big rally. When Bitcoin takes off again, they all start going on about Bitcoin, or when the markets hit all-time highs, they start talking about it's going to be the end of the world, it's going to all crash. And of course, they are writing headlines with emotional pulls in them because they want you to buy or click on their story. So that will make you feel an extra sense of worry. So stop reading that stuff. It doesn't help you. And the other one is stop trying to predict the future. And you won't know what the market's going to do. I don't know what the market's going to do. I look at it all day, every day, and I still don't know what's going to happen. Anybody who says they can predict it is obviously telling lies. But if you try and predict what might happen, what the Fed might do, whether the share price of this company is going to rally or this one's going to fall, you're just going to tie yourself in knots. So stop trying to predict what happens and just focus more on what is actually happening. So to sum that up, again, it's the word I keep saying is process. If you have a process and you stick to it, you stick to a regimented time frame, so you do it at the set time that you review your portfolios. If your process is throwing darts at a dartboard to pick shares or funds, so be it. At least you've got a process and it's objective. So stick to it.
Okay, so that moves us on to the last piece of the podcast, and we're going to be looking at auto switching.
Yeah, so just to give this a bit of context, auto switching is where you get a company, rather than you go and do the typical comparison site, find a deal you like on your utility bills. So we're talking about energy here, and you do the manual switch process yourself. These services will automatically keep looking at the market and find the best deal for you in terms of gas and electricity, and then keep moving you from provider to provider for you and save you money.
That's right. We've got the article on the website. I worked on it this week where I've come up with my own rating system and done a comparison of all the services, all the best 7 services that are out there. So really quickly, because we're conscious of time, there are 2 types of auto switch service, if you like. There's a free service and there's a paid for service. So the 2 best free services I can find are Look After My Bills and WeFlip. And the 2 best paid for services that I could find were Flipper and Switched.
So you said paid for and free. I suppose just to give that to explain that, there are services where you don't get charged anything and you sign up to it and they keep flipping you, and they appear free because you don't get charged anything, and they earn their money from the utility companies, don't they?
That's exactly right.
And the paid for services, they make most of their money from customers paying to be subscribed to their service, is that right?
Yeah, but they also earn commission as well. But the good thing about those is they are whole of market. So if you're going to pay for that service, then you do get access to every lender, and you can be absolutely guaranteed you're getting the best deal on the whole of market.
So the moral of this piece then, Andy, is that if you're going to go and use a switching service, the ones that appear free aren't whole of market because they only show you deals of companies that they actually got commercial arrangements with.
And that's no problem. I mean, so long as you know that you might not be getting the very best deal, you're not paying for it, so that's fine.
Yeah, and you might still be saving money, but the ones that you pay an upfront fee for, or annual or monthly subscription, that's because they're showing you the whole of the market.
Yeah, you're paying a premium just to guarantee you've got all bases covered.
And just one final point on that before we finish the podcast. There has been an interesting development in that market because there was news that broke of the major utility companies, so the major energy providers, not paying the commissions to the switching services, so these auto switching companies. Because whenever you switch an energy company, if you go to a comparison site or even something like Martin Lewis, then they will get paid a commission from the company that they refer, so the one that they recommend. And that is how the whole system works. And they obviously pay the commission because you're a new customer. But because you're going to keep switching all the time with these auto switching companies, the energy firms don't really like that because they make all their profit from your inertia, you going on their standard tariffs, and they charge you a fortune. Of course, if you keep being switched every few months or every year, then they're not going to make as much money. So therefore, they're starting to hold back that commission from those services, basically trying to disrupt the industry and trying to close them down in a way by strangling the revenue that they need to survive. So it'll be interesting to see if the free, in inverted commas, auto switching services do actually last.
Yeah. Good stuff. Okay, so if you want to get in touch with Damien, you can do so. It is Damien at moneytothemasses.com. If you want to get in touch with Damien on Twitter, it's at moneytothemasses with a number 2. Check us out on Instagram.
Or one thing I forgot to mention there, Andy, don't forget, if you sent in mortgage questions recently for the mortgage broker, well, we've actually answered them. Those videos are starting to be published. They're all obviously asked anonymously. Lauren went to meet the mortgage broker, asked the questions. Some of those are out now, so go and have a look at our Instagram.
Also, we mentioned a couple of weeks ago about our YouTube channel. We've seen loads of you sign up, so thanks ever so much for that. Do keep doing that, because we're going to be producing over the next few weeks lots and lots of really interesting content, and we're rebranding it. It's all exciting.
And we've got a green screen. Right, on that note,
Until next week.
Until next week.
Don't forget to claim your free copy of Damien's best-selling book, The 30-Day Money Plan. Sort your finances in just 5 minutes a day, worth $4.99. Just go to moneytothemasses.com/podcast to find out how.